Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session entitled Accelerating Innovation for Children and Adolescents with Cancer. Our name is our mission. I am Teresa de Rojas. I'm a pediatric oncologist and the scientific coordinator for Accelerate.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea de Madone, and I'm Accelerate coordinator.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Hanke. I'm the Accelerate Policy and Communications Administrator.
So the three of us are part of the Accelerate team, and we are really pleased to present this session to you at the SIOP conference. Okay, so let's begin to explain why we need to accelerate drug development for children and adolescents with cancer. I think we can all agree that we need new drugs for children with cancer. In fact, there is a current paradox in the field of oncology. On one side, we have the adult oncology, in which we have a lot of new drugs in development. However, these drugs rarely become therapies for children. And this is due in part because of the current regulatory frame in which there are a lot of pediatric developments that are either waived or delayed, allowing for poor access to pediatric patients into these innovative trials. On the other hand, we have to consider that children and adolescents with cancer represent a rare population with small sample sizes. Therefore, the commercial interest of developing new drugs for this population is small for companies. Once again, worsening the access to innovation for our patients. In fact, when we have a look at the number of new anti-cancer medicines that were approved since 2008, so over the last decade, we see a huge discrepancy between adults and children. In adults, more than 150 new anti-cancer drugs have been approved in this time period, as opposed to only 18 new drugs for children and adolescents with cancer. We're talking about new molecular entities, targets. Out of these 18 new drugs for children, 15 have in fact the same indication in adults and in children. One, everolimus, has a different indication, and there are only two pediatric specific cancer drugs, dinutuximab and its variants, that have been specifically developed for children, as you know, more concretely for the treatment of neuroblastoma. Furthermore, it's not only that very few new drugs have been approved for a pediatric indication, it's also that those that have been approved with big delays. As you can see in this graph, we're showing the 15 medicines that have the same indication in adults and children that got the approval. And as you can see, for some of them, the time between the first market authorization in adults and the first market authorization in children has a delay of up to 17 years, as is the case of dinutuximab, okay? So even the few drugs that got approved can have very big delays until they get approved for children. So we need to accelerate drug development for children. We need to close that gap between science on one hand and the needs for our patients, for children and adolescents with cancer. We need to improve their access to innovation. And for that, there are two main concepts that need to be understood. On the one hand, we have to make sure that the many drugs that are developed and approved in adults get to have a pediatric development, at least those that make sense. And for that, we have to promote mechanism of action-based development. On the other hand, we have to prioritize specific pediatric drugs. And with these two ways, we hope to close that gap between where the science is going and what the needs for our patients are. So with all this in mind, Accelerate's platform has established 5 core priorities. We want to achieve mechanism of action-based drug development. We need to prioritize oncology drugs to meet the needs of our patients. We need to reduce delays to initiate pediatric development of innovative drugs. We also want to promote more effective and flexible rewards for companies to develop compounds for children. And we want to include more adolescents and young adults into early adult trials so that they can benefit as well from innovation. So now that we understand why we need to accelerate, we want to see how we can achieve that. And for that, first you have to understand that up until now, or historically, the different actors that intervene in drug development, in clinical trials, have been working in silos and mostly continue to do so now. So we have academia and clinicians and researchers working alone in a silo. We have the regulatory bodies with the FDA, EMA on another side. We have the patients and advocates, and we have the industry totally separated. But all of them are essential for drug development, as you know. So what Accelerate does is bring them all together, because Accelerate is a multi-stakeholder platform. So we gather all of these stakeholders, all these actors, and make them work together. We sit them all together at the table discussing how to improve and accelerate drug development for children and adolescents with cancer. And in fact, we have been so successful since Accelerate began a few years back that we already have over 100 regulators being part of Accelerate, over 50 patient advocates, over 300 industry representatives, and over 500 academic researchers and clinicians, all of them working together. And very importantly, they work together as equal partners. Accelerate is not driven by the industry, in fact, is independent from the industry and funded by charities. It's also not driven by academia, nor by any of these actors. They are all equal partners. Another key feature of Accelerate is the international participation. And as you can see in this global map, we have a very good representation internationally already, of course, especially in high-income countries. And this is growing. You can see in blue participants from countries that joined recently in this year's annual conference. In fact, here you have a picture of our last annual conference, which was earlier this year. And here, not all the attendants are represented because they couldn't fit. There were so many of them. These two concepts, being multi-stakeholder and being international, are of course also represented in the steering committee of Accelerate. So as you can see, we have the representation from academia, from the patients' advocates, from the industry, and from the regulatory bodies. And again, they are all equal partners. You can see familiar faces for sure, because they are all very relevant in the field of pediatric oncology, working as equal partners towards the common goal of accelerating drug development for children and adolescents.
Now, let's dive into what we do in order to accelerate innovation in drug development for children and adolescents with cancer. We will provide you a brief overview of the 5 pillars represented in the work Accelerate does. As illustrated in the next slide, the work we are carrying out covers 5 areas of intervention. The first one is represented by research. We have several working or research groups which are currently active to address pediatric access, regulatory, and science. We have then the pediatric strategy forums. We already have 5 and 2 are in the pipeline, which are scientific meetings aiming at facilitating prioritization of compounds in order to better meet the needs of patients and to increase visibility of pediatric development. We have then the annual conference, the yearly event to discuss the latest developments in regulatory and science in pediatric cancer worldwide and define the Accelerate work plan for the year to come. We have then education on drug development in pediatric oncology for all and open access. And last but not least, policy, where we monitor the ongoing and upcoming regulatory and legislative initiatives in the area of childhood cancer, ensuring they will meet the real needs of our young patients.
Okay, so let's start our 360-degree journey through Accelerate activities. And let's begin with the research activities that we do. What we do in research is to analyze specific pediatric oncology challenges and to propose solutions. We pick hot, burning topics in drug development and try to figure out what is the issue and how can we solve it. So here on the slide, you can see the 5 currently active research groups in Accelerate. One is Fostering Age-Inclusive Research FAIR trials. Another one is the Fit for Filing. Then we have the long-term follow-up group, international collaboration, and real-world data. I will explain 2 of them so you have an idea of what we do in these research groups. So the first one is the FAIR group, which tries to address the issue of adolescents and young adults not having sufficient access to innovation, to clinical trials. And for that, they have developed several activities. One of them is the FAIR for AYA stamp, as you can see on the slide. This is a stamp that is offered for trials which actively avoid unnecessary barriers based on age. And in fact, there have been already 3 trials that have received this FAIR for AYA stamp. So these are trials that allow inclusion of adolescents below the age of 18, avoiding unnecessary barriers to innovation for these patients. Another example is the International Collaboration Working Group, which has the aim of improving intercontinental collaboration. As you know, pediatric oncology is a rare disease, so the numbers are very slow, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. This means that it's absolutely necessary that we have international collaboration and have international trials. So in our group, what we're trying to do is, well, first have an idea of the landscape, of the current landscape of intercontinental collaboration. And then we are trying to identify the hurdles to understand why there aren't more trials that are conducted intercontinentally. What I will show you now is a short clip of the first results of the group that were presented at our recent 2021 annual conference. In this map, you can see in how many of the 182 intercontinental trials each continent participated. And as you see, North America participated in almost all of them, followed by Europe, with far less participation of other continents. So the next steps for our working group will be to identify existing hurdles and propose solutions to improve
intercontinental collaboration in clinical research, we hope for the benefit of children and adolescents with cancer.
Another key activity of Accelerate is organizing the pediatric strategy forums. These forums are meetings in which we gather multi-stakeholder experts to recommend solutions to critical questions in pediatric oncology drug development. So, same as in the research group activities, we focus on a dedicated specific hot topics, and we invite the best experts about that topic. And we sit them together at the table in a usually 2-day or 3-day meeting to discuss the topic and come up with solutions. These meetings are per invitation only and include, same as in all Accelerate activities, the representation from all drug development actors. So we invite academic experts, pharma companies that are developing drugs of interest for that topic, regulators such as FDA and EMA representatives, and of course, patient advocates. These forums are usually held twice a year, once in the US and once in the EU alternatively. Due to the COVID situation, the forums for these years have been organized virtually. So to give you a better understanding of how these forums work, I will show you the example of the ALK inhibitors forum. In fact, we organized an update meeting to the first PSF ever, which was about this, recently in January this year. So a bit of background, you have to understand how ALK inhibitors started to be developed and why they become so crucial in pediatric oncology. As you may know, ALK was discovered as a target and playing a key role in cancer back in '94. Already then, it was evident that it played a role not only in adult cancer, concretely in lung cancer, but also in tumors that are of interest in children, like anaplastic large cell lymphoma or inflammatory myofibroblastic tumor, and of course in neuroblastoma. In spite of this, the development of ALK inhibitors was totally focused on lung cancer, in the adult tumors. And some years later, in 2011 and in the US, and in 2012 in Europe, it got, the first ALK inhibitor got marketing authorization, crizotinib, for lung cancer. Unfortunately, even though it was already clear that this target could be of interest for children and adolescents, this drug received a waivered pediatric development with the argument that lung cancer does not occur in children. And this is one of the reasons under the PRIA regulation in the US and the European still current regulation to get a waiver for a compound. In spite of this, the pediatric oncology academic community worked for the next decade in investigating ALK inhibitors in children and adolescents. And in fact, thanks to that, this year, crizotinib received marketing authorization by the FDA in anaplastic large cell lymphoma. And there are currently approved PIPs for ALCL and IMT in Europe as well. So, as you see, there has been a delay of 10 years between the first marketing authorization for adults and the authorization for children and adolescents. And the academic community had to step in to investigate this compound in children and adolescents. So we have to work on avoiding this scenario where scientifically and medically unjustified waivers are delivered. This is just to show you how complex this landscape can be, and we are just talking about one specific group of compounds, the ALK inhibitors. So not only this, but another problem is that, well, or another opportunity, depending on how you see it, is that many ALK inhibitors have started to be developed for adults in the recent years. So the landscape is really complex, and that's why a first Pediatric Strategy Forum was organized already several years ago, and recently this year we had an update meeting. And I want to show you a clip or some clips, some short clips of this update Pediatric Strategy Forum on ALK inhibitors, so you get an idea of what is discussed there. You will see Professor Andy Pearson presenting the ALK inhibitors landscape and discussing the main issues that need to be solved for children and adolescents with cancer.
As we understand, demonstrates the current position as of today, with yellow blocks being completed or ongoing studies, and those in green planned or studies. And we have 3 PIPs which are publicly available. So there has, without question, been some movement in the ALK landscape over the last 3 to almost 4 years. Very much the overall conclusion is that, I mean, without question, there was single agent activity in anaplastic large cell lymphoma, IMT, and neuroblastoma, which was in 2017. We need more data on the activity in CNS alpha fusion tumors, and Amar and Francois beautifully presented that. We, I think, have repeatedly during the meeting highlighted that acute toxicity is an important element of the decision-making process. So I think the challenges now, we feel, are how to combine these products with other therapeutic agents and how to establish their role in standard of care therapies. And that means a partnership between academia, lung trials, and industry.
So as you see, this is just an example of how complex, but also how relevant these pediatric strategy forums are. And here you have an overview of all the pediatric strategy forums that have been organized so far. The first one, as I mentioned, was the one on ALK inhibitors back in 2017, and with the recent update this year. But there have been other also very crucial strategy forums, such as on mature B-cell malignancies, on checkpoint inhibitors, on AML, which already had an update meeting itself, and also on epigenetic modifiers, which also had an update meeting in July last year. For this year, we have an upcoming meeting on CAR T cells in May, and at the end of the year, we will have a dedicated forum on sarcoma. So as you see, these are really, really hot topics that are very complex and that really benefit from multi-stakeholder actors sitting together and discussing concrete solutions. And for each forum, a manuscript is published with all the information and the conclusions being made publicly available.
Now let's move to the third part of our work, which is represented by the annual conference. The annual conference is the largest and is the most important event we organize every year in the month of February. It offers the participants a unique opportunity because on one side, they can listen and discuss with international experts about the latest developments in science and regulation in pediatric oncology. And on the other side, we showcase the latest results of the platform. And we define together with participants the priorities of the annual work. Now, let me just give you a small taste from the last edition of the annual conference with this short video clip showing Professor Dr. Julia Glade-Bender from the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, who was addressing the international precision oncology landscape and the needs of access to medicine.
So I think most people know that many centers, many platforms now have a multidisciplinary clinical sequencing program, and the workflow works very much like this all around the world. However, what was imminently clear from the very start was how very few patients were actually getting their matched targeted therapy. Really, with rare exception, the number of patients that were getting to therapies were in the single digits. This schema that was published by Jones et al. Recently in Nature Reviews Cancer, I think gives the best overview of national and international precision medicine programs for pediatric oncology right now. And many countries or countries together have developed a platform which, as you can see, can have a number of molecular profiling techniques. I think we really need to address many of the gaps now that are in the international platform, and that is that we do not have a programmatic, centralized international repository for the genomic data of these patients and the targeted agent experience, including these real-world data situations.
Okay. Another area in which Accelerate has recently started to be active in is education. In fact, we have launched a webinar series this year about strategic and regulatory science, because we know that this field is extremely complex, but however, there is the interest and the need from all the stakeholders actually to be better trained in this area. That's why we have the spirit of education in Accelerate as well. We already had our first webinar, which was very successful, but aside from having this more frequently, we are also starting to organize other educational activities that will come up soon. So stay tuned for more. And you must know that we are, of course, thinking of young investigators, particularly for education, but not only. We intend to provide activities with something for everyone. So we're going to show you a short clip of our first webinar that gathered more than 400 registrations. So it was really a huge attendance success. And also from the feedback we got was very beneficial and interesting for everyone. So I leave you with Professor Gilles Vassal and a short clip of this webinar.
For 10 drugs entering drug development in adults, only one, as an average, becomes a medicine approved. After the approval, there is a post-marketing surveillance, which is important because at the time the drug is proposed, prescribed to many more patients than the number of patients who participate in clinical trials. And it is very important to make surveillance to watch what is happening to the drug in the real life. So if we summarize, why the regulation failed? First, because they were drug-centric and not patient-centric, looking at the unmet needs. Second, they were driven by the audit indication rather than the mechanism of action, the target, and the patient needs. And finally, there has been too many delays in starting pediatric development that generating too often a situation that the clinical trial started when the drug was already marketed and losing time for patients.
So Accelerate is also involved into policy. When we look what we do in terms concretely towards policy, we monitor the regulatory and policy developments in both the EU and the US in the scope of pediatric and orphan medicines. So to give you a concrete example, we monitored pharmaceutical legislation in the EU and Race for Children Act in the US, and how that these policy involvements influenced our community. Furthermore, we try to engage with the authorities where possible. For example, we submitted an Inception impact assessment on the pharmaceutical strategy in that scope, on the orphan and pediatric regulations in the EU. And this was supported by all of the stakeholders of the group. And yeah, we hope, of course, that in the following years, there's more to come. Okay, and now to give you a concrete example in how we address these pediatric unmet medical needs. So as you are aware, Accelerate is working in close cooperation with the FDA and the EMA, who have a representative in the steering committee of the platform. A concrete example of alignment of our work with the regulators is offered by the recent publication of the joint European Commission EMA progress report of the 2018 EMA European Commission Joint Action Plan, which was published in December 2020. This joint action plan on pediatrics is aimed to support the development of medicines for children in Europe. And they have 5 key areas described by this plan. Accelerate has actively contributed to identifying pediatric medical needs in oncology. And in this key area of pediatric medical needs, the EMA European Commission recommends conducting multi-stakeholder workshops in other selected therapeutic areas, using the Accelerate Pediatric Strategy Forums as a successful initiative to be replicated in other pediatric specialties.
Okay, so after this overview of some of the things that Accelerate does, you can see that we are all working together toward our final goal, which is to accelerate innovation in drug development for children and adolescents with cancer. As a take-home message, we would like to remember what Accelerate is in a nutshell. So, first of all, why do we need to accelerate? Because we need new drugs for children and adolescents with cancer. What is Accelerate? We are a multi-stakeholder, international, patient-centered, problem-solving, independent platform. So it's a very, very unique platform. And how do we accelerate? Well, we have these 5 main areas of action. We organize pediatric strategy forums, we do research with working groups, we organize educational activities, we are active in policy, and of course we have our annual conferences. We want to thank, as always, the Andrew McDonough B+ Foundation for their very generous support. And we want to invite you to help us accelerate. So follow us on social media or getting in contact with us through our email. And you can have a look at our website following the QR code at the bottom. So many thanks for your attention, and let's all accelerate together.
Bye. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.